Good morning, folks. It's time for another batch of recordings of Storytime with Nick. In a new location right now, just trying things out. Don't mind that. So this is going to be another little mini-series that I want to do because it's now October 2021 as of the time that I am posting this, which marks 9 years since Hurricane Sandy hit. I know it'll be 9 at the end of the month, but I sort of wanted to make this a Hurricane Sandy month type thing since it was in October. And I want to make this a little retrospective series looking back 9 years later. So today's episode is going to be about our preparations and sort of the build up to the day that the hurricane hit. So really the first time I had heard anything about it was my mother talking with my grandfather. Because at this point, it was 2012, it was just my grandfather. My grandmother died in 2011. So at that point, we were talking it over. I heard them talking it over, actually. They were talking about how bad do you think it's going to be? What could the ramifications be? This and that. And the next time I had heard about it was when our school district had put out a memo just a day later. This was about 4 or 5 days before the storm hit, and we didn't really think it was going to be that serious. No, actually, it was 6 days. It was 6 days, yeah. They had put out a memo saying, we are aware of the situation, we're going to stay on top of it, if anything does come up, we'll let you know on what our next move is going to be in regards to Hurricane Sandy, because there's a good chance that it might actually come this way. We know how that worked out. But let's just stick to where we were in 2012. So we're kind of mulling it over. Now I'm starting to get curious because it's like, so something big's coming this way, you say. Because at this point, I'm 7 years old? No, 7. Yeah, I am 7 years old, actually. So at that point, I started to become curious about the whole concept of this thing. And I was talking to my mother, and she was like, well, hurricanes are big destructive storms that do a lot of bad things, so hopefully it won't come here because there was a lot of bad stuff that happened a couple of years ago down in this place called New Orleans, because at this point I wasn't really familiar with the layout of things and also what the fuck happened to Hurricane Katrina. So really it was sort of something that she tried to downplay because I was so young and she didn't want me to freak out about it. And at that point, I kind of brushed it off thinking, okay, maybe it's not going to be a big deal because actually, as a matter of fact, we got hit by Hurricane Irene just the year earlier. And that was my first ever experience with a hurricane. But at that point, it wasn't a hurricane. At the point it hit us, even though it hit us dead center, it was Tropical Storm Irene. And oddly enough, it did happen on one of my friend's birthdays. We were out celebrating his birthday that day at a bowling party. And it was really fun, but that's just a side note. That was my first ever exposure to a hurricane, but at that point, they weren't calling it a hurricane. It was just a really, really, really bad thunderstorm. So much rain that day, too. But anyway, back to Sandy. So, the school board was trying to figure out what the fuck to do, and people all over town were trying to figure out what the fuck to do. Some of my mom's friends were calling her saying, hey, are you guys preparing for Sandy? It's going to be like really bad. It's going to be really bad. It's going to cause all this damage and it could come straight through our town. It could come straight through our county. It's going to barrel straight through straight through our state, they're saying, no matter what. It's going to go right through Jersey. And she's like, yeah, I don't know. They said that about Hurricane Irene, that it was going to be the storm of the century, but all we really got was some water that cleared up by the end of the day. Here's the thing. For her, it's something like, if it's not going to be another Katrina, then she has no real reason to worry about it. But either way, that was just how things were. So the days pass, and the news starts ramping up its reports, because as it gets closer, you can kind of get a better handle on where it's going to go. At this point, it already fucked up the Caribbean and the Bahamas and all that. At this point, everything there was just fucked. And I had no idea because, like I said, my mother was trying to keep me calm about it, trying to make sure I didn't know all these things. Like, oh my god, could we be the next Bahamas or something? The next Caribbean? She wanted to keep me calm. Like, don't worry, it's just going to be another Irene. We're just going to get a lot of rain, some wind. The storm will pass and we'll move on with our lives. So, for me, it was sort of what that was going to be like. I just expected a lot of rain and the end of the story. So obviously I already told you the story where she had gotten gassed by complete accident 2 days before the hurricane hit. That was complete accident, like I had mentioned in that story. She only got gassed because she legitimately needed gas that day. She was on her way home from work and decided, I'm a little low on gas. Let me just get it now, get it out of the way. Maybe I won't have to get it tomorrow on my way to work. Because she had no idea what was going to happen the next day. So she got the gas, full tank, which was really fucking expensive back in those days, but the way we're looking now, what's new there? So she got her gas, she came home, and when she came home, she had actually seen my uncle, her sister's husband. He was actually pumping gas out of their cars, not out of her car. He was pumping gas out of the cars that they had, which was, they owned 3 fucking cars, rich bastards. So he was pumping gas out of their cars to put them into a generator because he was really freaking paranoid of what was going to happen. And you know what? Do I blame him? No. When the largest hurricane ever recorded by physical size is barreling towards your state, maybe there's no such thing as overreacting, but he was being a bit of a paranoid douche about it. But then again, he always was a paranoid douche about literally anything that happened. So he was doing his thing, and he was like, oh, you guys need a generator. It's going to be really bad. It's going to be really bad. And she was like, no, we don't. It's probably just going to turn away once it gets here. It's not going to be a big deal. Considering how much bullshit my mother had been exposed to in the weather, she really didn't believe it. She tried every reason not to believe it. And at this point, I don't blame her. Because it's like, we sort of just got passed by Hurricane Henry. It was supposed to be a big deal. It didn't even hit us. We got a couple hours of light rain. That was it. We got a couple hours of light rain. And then the storm cleared up. We were supposed to get hit direct on. Long Island was supposed to be wiped off the fucking map, they were saying. But yeah, that was how it was. So I don't blame her for being like that, with shit like that going on all the time. But so, people were calling her more and more at this point, trying to see what she was going to do. Because some people were saying they were going to board up their windows. Some actually did. Board up their windows and doors. They had stockpiled on food. At this point, they were like, okay, we really got to do something. At this point was when the stores started filling up. Because one of her friends had said she wanted to go to ShopRite, but there was a line literally coming out the door, around the block. Remind you of anything? So, she was starting to get curious at that point, and was like, maybe this could be a little bit of a problem. Luckily, we already had a lot of food. We had an enormous refrigerator. Not like the one we have now, where we have this much a freezer and this much a fridge, and everything in the fridge is frozen too, because it doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. So, she's starting to take it a little more seriously now, because it's sort of been on a steady path towards us. Like, you know how the weather maps, they have this fucking, like, spear of trajectory type thing, where the farther away from the storm it goes, there's more possibility it could go this way, or it could go this way, or something like that. I forget the whole name of that thing. But it sort of had been pointing towards us the entire time. And when she realized that, she started to take it a little more seriously. And also when they started talking about the winds being like 90-something miles an hour, she was, at that point, she was like, okay, maybe we do have a problem, but we are stockpiled. We do have candles, because she had bought candles for no other reason than she felt like it. She wanted some decorative candles, like she wanted not these, like, high burn candles, the scented ones, if you know what I mean. She just wanted some decorative candles she could put in the candle holders in the chandelier in the living room. And she had bought a bunch of those because they came in a pack of a bunch, as well as some scented candles she already had laying around the house. So she was like, if worst comes to worst, I think we're set. So at least for that. So we decide to drive around some of the big stores in our area the day before the hurricane hits. And that was when we discovered that the gas lines were miles long, stretching into the next town. Lines from the next town were stretching into ours all the way down to Midtown. Many, many streets, 20, 30 street lines going into the next town, which there weren't even gas stations on the edge of that town. Actually, there was one, but I bet there were more coming from the other gas stations going further into that town. So I bet those lines were at least a mile long, at least maybe a mile and a half, if anything. But so at that point, I started to take it a little seriously too, because it was like, okay, why are there this many people online for gas if nothing's wrong? Even I could figure that out at 9 years old. And sorry if I said 7 earlier, I actually just remembered that I was 9, not 7. I don't know why my head said 7, but a little correction on my part there. So at that point, we were both able to start taking it seriously. And it was like, okay. Because we had actually driven around and seen some houses up. We had actually seen some houses with boarded up windows too. So it was like, all right, I guess they're taking it seriously too. Although these people probably prepared a million years ago for a hurricane they didn't even know was going to happen. Just being over paranoid pricks. But sometimes I guess it does pay off a little bit. So at this point, preparations are complete. Storm's heading right for us. The sun is nowhere to be seen. And we're ready to get this show on the road. And I'll save the good stuff for the next episode of Storytime with Nick. So, for now, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.